All right, so today I'm going to show you a full body mobility warm up that you can really do every day. You could do it as like a recovery tool, or you could do it as prep for your workout. But I think it's a great routine that will get a lot of mobility and a lot of range through a lot of different spots that we just don't normally hit within our workout. So try it, see how you feel afterwards. If you feel really good afterwards, maybe do it more often.
All right, we'll go child's pose to the left, and we're gonna sit back to our heels and try and stretch our lat by clawing our hand into the ground and sitting our hips away from our lat. Then we'll go child's pose to the middle, both hands kind of glued into the ground. Sit back with your hips, stretch both lats, and then to the right. And we'll go one more round through those.
All right, next we'll hit a T-spine rotation. We're gonna stay seated back on our heels, so try and get your butt to your heels. Hand behind the neck, one hand planted on the ground.
Feed the elbow through that little hole, thread the needle, and then rotate up. Eyes follow your elbow into the air, and we'll do 5 on each side. Good. Go ahead and switch sides. One thing you can also think about is assisting by pushing yourself open with the hand that remains on the ground. So rotate, eyes follow the elbow. Use your hand that's planted to push yourself open.
All right, from there we'll go high thoracic cat-cow. So same position, staying seated back on our heels. So we're not gonna let our butt arch. We're not gonna arch using our low back on this specific variation of cat-cow, but stay seated back on your heels. Arch up by pushing away with your hands and try and arch that back as high up towards the ceiling as you can. And then drop your chest, relax everything, and just work on pushing through that range and kind of dropping through that range. Get some range through your upper spine. All right, next we'll go figure 4 to down dog. So I'm just going to try and bring my shin up into figure 4. The higher that shin is, the harder the stretch. Drop both hips towards the ground. Push up into down dog. Push away with my shoulder blades, reach my tailbone as high as I can. And then drop into figure 4 on my other side. And we'll go 5 on each side here with a push up to down dog in between. All right, then we'll go half kneeling hip flexor stretch. From here, I'm just in this half kneeling position. So one knee down, one knee up. I'm gonna dig my big toe down into the ground or push it down into the ground. I'm gonna squeeze my back glute. I'll keep my ribs down and I'll try and push my hips forward while maintaining those 3 positions. And then I'll rock back and I'll push back into a hamstring stretch where my leg is relatively straight with a slight bend in my knee. I'm pulling my toes towards my face and I'm digging my heel down into the ground at about 10 to 20%. And I'll rock back into hip flexor, big toe, glute, ribs, and then shift forward, back into hamstring, slight bend in the knee, pull those toes up, dig that heel down, and we'll hit 5 on each side here. All right, again, ribs down, push that big toe down into the ground, squeeze this glute, push those hips forward, knee's gonna come forward, push back into hamstring, slight bend in the knee, hips dip back, heel dug down, toes pulled up, back to hip flexor, and we'll go 5 here. Good. Okay. All right, then we'll go groin rocker. One knee down, one leg straight out to the side. I'm gonna try and make sure that the outside edge of that foot stays in contact with the ground. Almost as if I'm grabbing the ground with that foot. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about with my toes too. Especially my big toe, digging that one in to create that arch. All right, so from this position, ribs down, push your hips back. Should feel a good groin stretch here. Try and drop this hip and this shoulder towards the ground. And then back up tall. And we'll just hit 5 on each side of these groin rockers. When I come down, my inside arm, I'm trying to kind of dip that elbow back and rotate my torso just a little bit away from the groin that I'm stretching. All right, so again, ribs down, hips back, drop this elbow back and rotate away from that groin. We'll hit 5 here, or at least work towards rotating away from that groin. If it's a little bit tight, be careful for the first few reps and see if you can challenge the range as you go. From there, you can stand on up. We'll go into 5 squats. We're just gonna do 5 squats with a few variations. We'll start with our feet together. So trying to touch your butt down to your heels. If you can, we'll do 5 of these. I like reaching my arms out just to help keep my chest a little bit more vertical doing this movement. Cool, so we'll hit 5 of these. You don't have to alternate like I am. I just wanna make sure I show you both views. Good, then we'll go neutral stance squats for 5. So just how you would normally squat. Again, focus on keeping that spine nice and straight. Then we'll go wide stance. For wide stance, I like to push my hips back as I squat down and try and push my knees out just a little bit to track my toes. So we'll go 5 of these. Good, next we'll hit cross under lunge. So for cross under lunge, this leg is just gonna drop back behind, straight to the side as I kind of rotate this hip forward. And we'll just hit 5 on each side here. Rotate that hip forward, or at least resist it opening up, right? All right, we'll hit 5 lateral lunges on each side. So for a lateral lunge, the outside edge of my foot stays down. I drop into a single leg squat where my foot, knee, and hip are all in one relatively straight line, and I drop my hips back. Cool, so I'm going to be stretching this groin as I drop into a single leg squat and just push back to my starting position, and we'll hit 5 of these. And 5 on the other side, again, outside edge down, single leg squat by keeping our foot, knee, and hip on one straight line. So from this position, I'm just staggered with my feet. My back toes are in line with my front heel, and my feet are about hip width apart. I'm gonna try and keep both hips level as I push my hips back and stretch primarily this front hamstring. And then I just squeeze this glute, come back tall, and we'll hit 5 of these. Good. Hit the other side. And when I'm doing these, I'm trying to keep my ribs down, trying to keep my shoulders back so that I know that my spine stays in a straight line and that all the motion has to then come from my hips. Cool, so brace the core, keep your ribs down, shoulders back, push your hips back so that you bend at the hip as opposed to doing this where it's mostly through that lower back. Cool, so brace the core, shoulders back, hinge with the hips, squeeze the glute to come back tall. Good, then we'll come into this wide stance. We'll keep the outside edges of our feet down. We're gonna push our hips back into that same hip hinge position, similar to an RDL. So ribs down, shoulders back. My hips are pulled underneath my ribs, right? I'm not arching. So I'm gonna bring the front of my hips and the bottom of my ribs together, right? Shoulders back, and then while maintaining these positions, I'm going to push my hips back while keeping the outside edge of my feet down, and then squeeze the glutes to come back tall. So from this side, outside edge stays down, feet are wide, brace the core, keep your hips and ribs locked in, shoulders back, push the hips back, should feel a decent hamstring stretch, and then just pattern squeezing the glutes to bring yourself back to the starting position as opposed to arching with that back. So these are terrible reps. These ones keep my back a little bit safer. Good, then still in that wide stance, we're gonna go overhead, and I'm going to reach to one side, and I'm gonna try and open up my last rib from my hip. So again, pushing that outside edge of my foot down into the ground to keep this hip down. And then from there, I'm trying to open up this rib by reaching across to stretch what's called my QL. And then we'll just come right back to center and we'll reach with the other side. So outside edge of that foot down, big reach, get as much space between that last rib and the hip as you can. And we'll hit 5 on each side here. Boy. You can reach with one hand or both. My left side is much tighter than my right, but if you're someone who has a lot of low back pain, loosening up these QLs, man, this is money. And the last thing that we'll do in this position is just a wide stance trunk rotation. So outside edges stay down. I squeeze my glutes to keep my hips locked in, brace my core to lock in my lower spine, my lumbar spine, and then I'm trying to just rotate through my upper back while my eyes follow. So everything essentially above my belly button can rotate, and I can start to challenge that range. We'll hit 5 on each side here. Start small in the small range and build some confidence as you kind of widen it out. You don't have to muscle through this. You can stay as relaxed as you want through this motion. All right, so we'll hit these pogos. These pogos are great for maintaining a lot of tendon and ligament health and performance. So always a great idea to keep some type of plyometrics within the program, regardless of what level of plyometric that is, right? So we'll just start nice and easy. We'll just hit these pogos where I'm trying to stay a little bit braced here, so I'm not arching to the low back. I'm not trying to keep my legs too bent, but I'm also not trying to lock them out. I just kind of want to stay in this nice stacked, rigid position and just find a spring through my heel. So I'm going to do that by pulling my toes up each rep and then high-fiving the ground to spring me back into the air. So from the side, it'll look like this. Just nice and easy, and you'll hit 20 of these. Pull each toe up, try and land flat-footed, and let that spring you back into the air. The goal isn't to heel strike, but your heel will probably tap on the ground slightly. Cool. So most of the weight towards like the center of your foot, and you just pop right back into the air. One more time, just like this. Not too much knee bend, not too much bending at the hips. Ribs stay down, and you're just bouncing through this range for about 20 reps. Then once you're done there, you can go side to side, so just left to right, making sure that you keep all those same positions. And now the weight will shift a little bit towards the side of each foot. And we'll go 10 on each side there. And then you can just hit these rotational ones. So from this position here, the same position we've been working on, I'm just going to rotate my hips 45 degrees to the left and then 45 degrees to the right as I stay facing forward with essentially my ribs up to my shoulders. So it should look like this. And we'll hit 10 on each side or 20 of these. Again, focusing on trying to just spring back into the air, not too much knee bend, not too much arch at the low back. Cool. All right, that's all I got.